Welcome to this week's edition of EBC Sports International. I'm Schulte Horvath, broadcasting from Vancouver, BC, Canada. Thanks for joining us today. With me today on our program are EBC correspondents from around the world who will discuss sports topics in these interesting times. We hope everyone is staying safe during this pandemic. Now let's meet our correspondents. In Quezon City, Philippines, we have Ben Bernaldez.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the program.
In Seattle, we have Michael.
How you doing, Schulte? How you doing, everybody? Hey, Schulte, I just wanted to let you know that Tom Brady says hi as well.
I'll keep that in mind. In Washington, D.C., Ken Cruz.
Hola, let's get it. I'm ready for this.
And last but not least, in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, Zarita Sese.
Hey, Zolti. Hey, everyone else.
Thanks, everyone, for being here. And now, here's some sports news that's been making headlines this week. In British Columbia, BC Premier John Horgan, the equivalent to a governor in the United States, offered the city of Vancouver and the surrounding communities to the NHL as a hub to play the remainder of the season and the playoffs. Horgan sent a letter to NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman last week outlining the proposal to finish the season with no fans in the stands. Horgan mentioned that Vancouver would be an ideal place to play out the games, as the province hosted the 2010 Olympics as well as 2 World Junior Hockey Championships. Bettman replied with a letter thanking the Premier for the kind words and stated they will let the province of BC know if there's anything the NHL needs between now and the time the season resumes. Next, we'll go to Zarita for an update out of Toronto.
So in Toronto, it was announced Friday that the provincial government here in the province of Ontario will be allowing practice facilities of the city's professional teams to be opened. So that affects NHL, NBA, MLB, MLS, and CFL. The specifics of how they're going to go about opening these facilities will be dependent on what the clearance is for the leagues themselves. So, for example, the NHL is not allowing any of their teams to move forward with phase 2 of their return to play protocols due to the fear of other teams having advantages if the city themselves are not open. Whereas in the NBA, they're slowly starting to open up their facilities. However, given that we're in Canada, a lot of our athletes have returned home to the United States, like Chicago, Miami, Florida, and San Diego. So we'll see how this will all pan out in the next couple of days.
Thanks, Sarita. Next, we'll jump over to Washington, D.C. with Ken Cruz for some golf news.
Sure. So it's actually local golf news. So the state of Maryland opened up some of the outdoor activities starting yesterday. Activities include that are included in the reopening of golf, tennis, fishing, some exercising on beaches. The stay-at-home order hasn't been lifted, and this will serve as a testing ground to reopen the state on a stage-by-stage basis. On a similar note, the Portland NBA news, the Portland Trailblazers and the Cleveland Cavaliers have reopened their practice facilities today, with the Denver Nuggets, Toronto Raptors, as Zarita announced, and the Sacramento Kings planning to reopen their facilities on Monday. The Dallas Mavs, who've been actually green-lighted to reopen their facility, have declined to do so as instructed by their owner, Mark Cuban, who says that he doesn't want to reopen if the regular testing of players and staff is not available. Pretty much he said it's not worth it. And so, I mean, it's a split with NBA teams. Lakers, on one hand, are looking to do some testing first before making any announcements. So looking forward to that.
Thanks, Ken. Next up, we'll go to Seattle with Mike Hudson, who has some sneaker news.
Thank you, Schulte. So there was a recent survey done by the NBA ranking the top 75 greatest NBA shoes of all time. So I'm not going to go through all 75. I'll share with you the top 5. So number 5 coming in is the Chuck Taylor All-Stars. So those are some pretty popular shoes, usually made popular by Bill Russell and those guys back in the 50s and 60s. Number 4 was the Nike Foamposite. So Penny Hardaway was the one that made this shoe pretty popular. Number 3 was the Nike Air Force Ones. So plenty of players who used to wear those. Rasheed Wallace.
Air Force One.
I remember. And then Nelly singing that song, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Number 2, the Jordan 1s, basically the first shoe that Jordan wore when he first came into the NBA. And then number 1, rounding out the top 75, is the Jordan 11s, which is basically the first basketball shoe to ever contain patent leather. So not only is Jordan the greatest of all time as a basketball player, but he is now officially the greatest sneaker of all time. Back to you, Zolti.
Thanks, Mike. And finally, we'll go to the Philippines with Ben Bernaldez.
Thanks, Zolti. For Philippine sports, the national athletes backed the Philippine Sports Commission's decision to cancel all its sports activities until December in compliance with the Interagency Task Force, or IATF, on emerging infectious disease guidelines that prohibit mass gathering amid the coronavirus disease or COVID-19 pandemic, even if the enhanced community quarantine is lifted. Sporting events in the Philippines are now the latest casualties in the war against COVID-19. The Philippine Sports Commission has decided to cancel all its sports activities until December of this year. After a virtual board meeting last Thursday, the agency's top sports official instituted the belt tightening measure in compliance with the directives of the Department of Budget Management and Interagency Task Force on prohibiting activities even beyond the enhanced community quarantine. So throughout the year, there will be no sporting activities here in the Philippines. That's it for me, Zolti.
Thanks, Ben. Those are the stories making headlines this week. Don't go away, because after the break, we have a lot of discussing to do. We'll be discussing the latest episodes of The Last Dance, Barkley versus Jordan feud, NBA and the NHL draft being postponed, and each of us will give our top 3 NBA jerseys of all time. EBC Sports International will be back in a moment. Welcome back to EBC Sports International. I'm Schulte Horvath, broadcasting from Vancouver. Thanks for staying with us. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that we are not professional sports analysts. We're just a group of friends who love talking about sports. Now let's go on to our discussions for this episode. Episode 5 and 6 of the highly anticipated Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Dance, aired last weekend, and it included a segment about Kobe. Ben, what do you think of the way they paid tribute to the late star?
Well, I cannot help to get emotional during the watching the episode 5. It begins at the 1998 All-Star Game where Kobe Bryant was making his first appearance, and Jordan, it was speculated at the time, was making his last All-Star Game. And it's particularly nostalgic, and in many ways uh, gave us a little bit of how Kobe was really a great player and who also follows in the footsteps of Michael Jordan. And it also shows that, according to Kobe himself, that it was Michael Jordan who guided him throughout his career. With all those 5 championships, it wasn't for it wouldn't be he won't be able to get those championships if not for the guidance of his big brother Michael Jordan. And it's really emotional to watch him talk about as if he was still alive right now. And we really appreciate how the director uh, made that episode as a tribute to Kobe Bryant. And we've seen how Kobe, a competitive person throughout his earlier days, and even during the All Star game, how the older guys was trying to test Kobe if it's going to be a one-on-one game. Kind of Michael Jordan says, "I will make it a one-on-one game for him." So it's really fun to see how Kobe really take his big brother as his idol, and really for all the speculation, all the debate about who's better, Kobe or Jordan. Kobe himself acknowledged that it was Michael Jordan, who made him the way he is right now.
Zarita, you were sorry, Mike, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I think that was the key thing, the key takeaway that I got. I mean, I think that was that surprised me that he said that at the end, where he goes, Kobe, come on, you could take on Jordan one-on-one. He's like, whoa, stops him, and he goes, hey, I wouldn't get these 5 championships until if it wasn't for Jordan. And I think just that small part of the show, which I wish it was longer, that portion, but that just went to show like how close these guys were, and we had no idea because they never publicized it. The media never got a hold of it, and it was just a very touching part of the show, because I feel like in one way or another, all of us want to be like Mike, right? I mean, a lot of players tried to be like Mike, and Kobe was like the closest. So it was just a really touching part of the show.
What's crazy to me is that I didn't realize. I mean, so I'm a huge Laker fan growing up, right? I mean, that's not a surprise by now. But I saw all these interviews with Kobe and all that. But it wasn't until after he retired that he started revealing just how much of a big brother role MJ had for him during his career. Because I mean, he during his career, you kind of had the feeling that he did all this hard work by himself, pushed himself, even through the most difficult times when he lost, he would just hit the gym. But then there's a lot of parallels to actually, where he got that work, that hard work from, and that's from his big bro, Michael Jordan. I mean, and even just the way that episode started, really pulled on my heartstrings, in memory of Kobe Bryant. I was like, all right, this is gonna be rough. It was a rough first 10-15 minutes, seeing all those Kobe highlights, seeing Michael Jordan talk about him. It's I would love to be more polished about talking about Kobe, but I'm still not over it. It's just crazy to me. And so it's one of those things that I think I'm never going to get over. But I appreciated how the documentary portrayed the big brother little brother relationship. What I'm curious with is if they re-edited anything post Kobe's death, or if this is how it was edited. I mean, obviously the in memory of Kobe in the beginning, but if there was any adjustments on how the whole Kobe portion was portrayed, if it would have changed if he was still alive today,
Yes, when you say that, Ken, I was a little disappointed because, like Mike was saying, I wanted it to be a little longer, and I think there was so much hype going into this episode about this being a Kobe episode. I was honestly expecting a full episode of him and Kobe, but I think it makes you question what else did they have planned for this episode, but it was cut too short. And the other thing that I really liked about that episode is, I don't know about you guys, but for me, I feel like that recognition among players isn't like that anymore. It's almost cliche, or it's not the right thing to do for you to acknowledge someone else's talent. So for Kobe of all players to be like, no, without MJ, you don't have a Kobe. And I was like, wow, you get to see how much Kobe actually respected and looked up to Michael Jordan.
And I think that just shows how truly humble Kobe is. I mean,
and I think a lot of that came after. Yeah, it came after his career. During his career, I mean, Mike, didn't you say how much you didn't like Kobe because of how pompous he was? But then
the media, yeah, totally.
Yeah. You see how much he changed. I think he just became more of a reflective person after his career. Really taking himself out of the picture and being okay, let's be real here. MJ's the GOAT. I did everything so that I can get as close to him as possible. Didn't get there. And I acknowledge that. And that takes so much. And that just shows how mature, he was already mature, as a player, from day one, but then how much he even matured, he just became the sage, wise, different beasts, like what is it? Same beast, different animal, whatever it is. Like post career, and it's. I was wishing for more, like as far as like what he brought to the table years to come.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
as you guys mentioned, it obviously wasn't a huge part of the episode, the whole Kobe thing. It was also mentioned in the episode that Jordan didn't want to go to the meeting with Nike because he wanted to sign with Adidas, which was, I mean, a crazy thing to hear nowadays. But back then, I mean, that was Adidas was the big thing, right? So Dolores Johnson, Michael's mother, forced him to go, and we all know how that turned out. Ken, I'm going to ask you this. How different do you think the basketball shoe game would be if he didn't listen to his mom and go to that meeting?
Well, that's the thing. Like he had a couple different options, right? So like, and the crazy thing is like, I knew about this before I watched this episode. So like the whole Converse situation was like, they don't want to put him as the forefront of the brand over Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. And so that made sense. And the whole Adidas thing is the founder of Adidas passed away. And just like a couple months before Jordan was going to meet with them, and then the wife was like gave like certain parts of the business to her children, and so it was like a perfect storm of like dysfunction within the brand at the time. So they couldn't, they pretty much didn't have any innovation to provide Michael Jordan, and so here comes little Nike at the time. Willing to pretty much cater to the guy, pay him like 3 times, like 3, 5, 10 times more than any other athlete. And it's just so insane that, and all of it was because he followed his mother's wish. Happy early Mother's Day, by the way, to all the mothers out there, including my mom. Thanks for all you do. So like, it's one of those things. And like on the whole mother aspect of it, side note, when MJ was still in high school, when he was a sophomore in high school, and he didn't make, famously didn't make that varsity team, right? He went back home and he was like, "Mom, I wish I was taller." And I think like she said something along the lines of like, "You have it, you have it in your heart. The tallness is within you. You can be as tall as you want to be in your thinking." Obviously Michael Jordan grew from his sophomore year, but like, things like that, and having that kind of like a support system, I think if he didn't have that, he probably would have been a completely different player, not even just like a signing with a completely different shoe brand, but a completely different player if he didn't have, such a great support system in his mom and dad.
Yeah, and like how they always say, mothers know best, right?
That's absolutely
right. They always know best. So yeah, I mean, for me, man, I would have loved to be a fly on that wall to hear that pitch meeting with Nike, man, to be able to change his mind like that. I mean, I know ultimately his mom was the one that basically told him to do it, and his dad, but I would have loved to be in that pitch meeting to basically see what the vision was for him. And it's crazy what his Falk, his agent, was saying, like their goal is to sell like 130 million shoes and like a year or something like that.
It was
no,
3 million a year.
No, 3 million.
3 million a year, and
$3 million, I think.
And they sold
$3 million in shoes, yeah.
And they sold 130 million shoes in 1 year. That's just insane.
Yeah,
it's funny because
Yeah, that's right. David Falk also was kind of instrumental convincing Michael Jordan's mom to listen and see the opportunity that's Nike's giving to him. And if not for David Falk and his mother, we wouldn't have Air Jordans right now. So it was really nice to see the history of how Air Jordan came to be with the participation of David Falk and most importantly, Michael Jordan's mom, Dolores. If not her pushing Jordan to go ahead and have that meeting and just listen to Nike and give them an opportunity that they can present what in store for Michael, and it made him more richer, even not with his contract in the NBA. So I think it's really fun to see that in the episode as well.
All right, and then so we moved on in the episode to the greatest basketball team ever assembled, 1992 Dream Team, which did not include one of the best point guards playing during that time, Isaiah Thomas. Zarita, I'm gonna throw this question to you. Do you believe Jordan when he said he didn't have anything to do with Isaiah being left off the team?
I believe him in that he probably didn't flat out say, like, I don't want that guy on the team, but you know very well that he had a lot to do with it. But it's also, Isaiah Thomas wasn't the most liked guy in the league, period. So it's more so like the talent of Isaiah Thomas, but you're risking the chemistry for the rest of the team. So I think it automatically outweighed it. So for Jordan to say he had nothing to do with it, I totally agree, but he probably indirectly did.
I mean, for me, this doesn't really matter. I mean, they blew out like Angola by like 70, beat Tunisia by like 90. I mean, but you know, for me, I don't think Jordan walked in and was like, "Hey, is Isaiah going to be on the team? If he is, then I don't
I'm
want
out."
him on." I don't think it's that. There's definitely insinuations, and yeah, to build off what Zarina was saying, you know, Isaiah Thomas, you know, at that time didn't really have a good relationship with Magic either. I mean, Magic even admitted in a book that, you know, he told them not to get Isaiah. So, I mean, there you go right there. So
I think, yeah, I think a bigger snub was Shaquille O'Neal getting snubbed for Christian Laettner for that team. You know, that's as far as like, I mean, at the time, you know, Christian Laettner was probably the best college basketball player. But I mean, like, you know, in the grand scheme of things, like Shaquille O'Neal is literally, you know, one of the best basketball players ever. And for him to get snubbed out in that dream team, I was like, you know, that's a huge thing. But as far as Isaiah Thomas, like, can you imagine how awkward those bus rides, those plane rides would have been, like, with all those guys that had pure hatred for the Pistons. You know, the dude was dirty. His team was dirty, and so like, and they took basketball. I want to say it's more seriously back then because you know, the players still take it seriously. But I mean, you know, they didn't grow up playing with each other like all these AAU teams nowadays. So, you know, like cities literally hated each other. You know, players literally hated each other up to this day. You know, these are like decade-long rivalries, and you know, and so I think for the sake of the dream team chemistry and, you know, overall happiness, I think that was a good move.
let me ask you guys a question.
So,
Would you take? I mean, John Stockton isn't bad, right? I mean, what do you guys?
Come on, man.
As far as I mean, who would you guys take, John Stockton or Isaiah Thomas? I mean, like straight up.
Isaiah for me.
Yeah, I think maybe like obviously like eventually John Stockton around like 94, 95 and up, like, you know, became the John Stockton that we thought of. But you know, it's one of those things where at that time it was definitely Isaiah Thomas, especially a two-time champion, you know.
Sure.
So during those same Olympics, we saw Toni Kukoc on the Croatian national team prior to being brought over to the NBA by the Bulls. Now, there was a bit of controversy because he didn't really have anything to do with, you know, the Pippen contract, but the Dream Team sure treated him that way. Ben, do you think it's fair to say the Dream Team was too hard on Kukoc?
I think it was Tony Kukoc was the victim of Jerry Krause's plot of intimidating Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. It backfired on Tony Kukoc. He did not know any internal conflicts between Jerry Krause and Pippen and Jordan at that time. So he paid the price. But eventually, after they showed the first game of Croatia and USA where they only limited Tony Kukoc for like 7 points, and then when they met in the finals, Tony Kukoc went to redeem himself, and the Dream Team kind of changed their outlook on Tony Kukoc and that he deserves to be in the NBA. And let's remember, the Bulls already drafted Tony Kukoc during that time. He did not play to the NBA because he wanted to stay in Croatia first because of the war that is happening back then. But after the Olympics and Tony Kukoc was able to play, and he really proved himself to be really pivotal role, his pivotal role in the many championships that the Bulls had. I think it was just unfortunate that Tony Kukoc was just the victim of Krause's plot against Jordan and Pippen.
Yeah, I think the thing that stood out to me in that part of the episode was that Kukoc didn't back down. I mean, yeah, he played a really bad game the first time, but in the championship game, he did not back down at all. And they were explaining how, he went through like poverty and the situation in Yugoslavia at the time. So I think that really impressed Jordan and Pippen. And, at first, they're known for testing you and seeing what you're made of, and then obviously Kukoc passed that test. So I think that's what really stood out to me in that portion of the episode.
Can you imagine being guarded full court by two of the best defenders for an entire game? For 2 games, I can't imagine that. But at the same time too, it just goes to show that I know you guys talked about he showed up in the second game, but the dude was in a war-torn country. So basketball, yeah, it's a release, but at the same time too, he's went through more than any of the NBA players pretty much in a short life. So as far as mental fortitude, the dude had it, right? And that's probably why, is that he was in such a crazy situation in his country that what's 2 guys guarding him full court to him? That's nothing, I'm still gonna show up. And so I think that just goes to show that basketball is a big thing in life, but I mean there's a huge context of where the guy was brought up from.
Yeah, and I think to give Kukoc credit as well, the first time, I think the reason why he played so poorly is because, obviously he's never played against NBA players before. So it's kind of oh man. But to give him credit, he's adapted to it. That's why he played so well the second game. And I think, that's the reason why he was the best European player at one point.
It's funny because what I focused on was how, I hate to use the word vengeful, but how vengeful, spiteful Michael Jordan was at the time to go specifically after him because he was Jerry Krause's guy. And so it goes to show how competitive Michael Jordan is, that every little thing he was going to make someone look bad or prove them wrong just by nitpicking at what they like, if you guys get what I mean.
Right. I agree.
Yeah. That's definitely an MJ thing. I mean, I think that's like most players, right? It's just how can I best see red? And then when they see red, it's just they turn into Saiyan to Super Saiyan, right? I mean, I think that's one of the signs of GOAT talk, of GOAT characteristics, and Jordan just had it better than anyone ever.
All right. That's a great discussion about the show. We still have lots left coming up. When we return, we'll talk about Barkley versus Jordan. We'll talk NBA and NHL draft being postponed. And we still have to reveal our top 3 NBA jerseys of all time. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to EBC Sports International. I'm Joel Horvath, broadcasting from Vancouver. Thanks for staying with us. Barkley versus Jordan was featured a bit in the documentary, but recently Charles stated that he feels sadness when thinking about his broken relationship with Michael. This, of course, started when Charles criticized Jordan's GM skills with the Wizards. Mike, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, for me initially, I was a bit bummed as well because seeing them together, it's very interesting because it's kind of like a yin and yang. You have Michael who's very conservative, very soft spoken, so to speak, very reserved, and then you have Barkley who's this rash guy, very extroverted, funny. And so they really meshed together really well. As you see them through the years, and you saw them through clips with the Dream Team and them joking around with each other, it's just you always just got a good feeling seeing them together. So it's a little sad that you hate to see things like this, people getting into rifts, and I think. For the most part, Barkley's doing his job. He's an analyst for TNT, and he was basically telling it how it is. And I think I don't know specifically what else he revealed. He may have revealed some other stuff that Jordan didn't like. But I think at the end of the day, Barkley is just doing what he can to basically tell the truth about what's going on. And I think I think it's not a secret that Jordan's struggling mightily as a GM and an owner with the
Yeah. Well, what if he did the opposite though, right? I mean, like, what if Chuck was like, all right, this GM, you suck at your job, and then he says, oh, but Jordan, he's doing a great job. Then you're obviously being biased towards your homie, and that's something that I know Charles Barkley would not have been able to live by. The guy tells it how it is, and that's why people appreciate him. And at the same time, MJ did not. He's the GOAT basketball player, but he is probably literally one of the worst owner GMs ever. He's literally was the GM / owner of the Bobcats during the 2012 team, during that lockout team. You know what their record was? 7-59. Literally the worst record ever. And so if you're just gonna disregard criticism where it's especially due, that's disrespectful to the sport, and Jordan should know that. The hard thing about Jordan is that he holds grudges, and it even goes to show I know Zarita said he's vengeful, right? Yeah, no, the dude holds grudges. He's wrathful. During his Hall of Fame speech, remember he called out Jerry Krause. I was like, bro, this is your Hall of Fame speech. Why are you calling out someone that you haven't been working under for decades already? And then the dude he's so great at basketball, but I don't know, man. It's just so hard to see him struggle at something, especially NBA related. He let Kemba Walker walk to the Celtics instead of paying him the just amount, especially for a loyal guy. You let him walk for nothing.
And I think to add on to that, Ken, is that what Barkley said is that Jordan has a lot of yes men around him. I think that's right. And so I think Jordan can handle the GM talk, because what analyst doesn't say that? But as far as taking it to another personal level, he's basically saying, hey, you're surrounding yourself with yes men, and this is kind of indicting other people in his inner circle that Jordan has. I think at the end of the day, he's being loyal to them as well.
Yeah, and just the persona of Michael Jordan. How do you people around him? They're probably thinking how am I going to question such a knowledgeable guy in basketball? But sometimes a player just can't translate to other aspects of basketball, and we see that all the time.
Magic Johnson as a coach, Larry Bird was a little better as a coach, but these guys are all-time greats, but they're not necessarily all-time great coaches. Phil Jackson wasn't anybody in the NBA, but all-time great coach. Same with Pat Riley, right?
Yeah.
Let me throw this question out there.
Phil Jackson won a championship, so Phil Jackson is different from other coaches, a player turned coach. But going back to Barkley and Jordan's relationship, Barkley's success with his broadcast and being an analyst was very successful because he never pulled any punches with his analysis. Unfortunately, in the case of his relationship with Jordan, when he made that comment, about, like what Mike said, how Jordan as a GM wasn't that successful. That made the rip on their great friendship for more than 10 years. And I think you're correct that Ken's correct also that Michael Jordan also hold grudges. But I think with the episode that we saw, then we saw how Charles Barkley and Michael Jordan were very close back then. And I think, and soon, hopefully, this rip between them would heal and they become friends again. I think that's the most important thing, that Charles Barkley admitted that he made a mistake by those comments back then.
So Zarina, let me throw this question to you. We saw in one of the episodes that Jordan kind of had a little bit of an issue with gambling, and Barkley has a long history of having a gambling problem. Do you think there's something, going like something deeper here than just his comments? Like, you think this could be maybe gambling related?
I don't know. That's pure speculation.
Oh yeah, 100%. There's no evidence of that. This is 100% speculation.
Zolty, is this breaking news right now? Are we breaking this? No, I'm just kidding. But I don't know. Like, honestly, I just think Michael Jordan just holds grudges. I hate to say it, but like, you can see it in the way that he reviewed that footage of Isaiah Thomas about shaking hands. Like, you could tell, like, he was already dismissive. He already made up his mind. So I honestly have no idea. Like, I don't know.
I think on the topic of like gambling as being Michael Jordan's like quote unquote kryptonite, I think that has a like kind of a relation with how opposite of a figure Charles Barkley was when he was playing. He was like, I'm not a role model, right? And so he was like that bad boy, but still beloved, can do anything and say anything he wants, versus the opposite, where Michael Jordan had to be this clean cut guy, and everybody loves him. Everybody loves him until they found that the dirt of him like having a quote unquote gambling problem, and at the same time too, like also like being like a little too rough on his teammates, hyper competitive, that kind of thing. And so that kind of yin and yang, as Mike refers to it, like maybe it just exploded. Maybe it just got that. There's such polar opposites that maybe Mike was like, hey man, I got to cut you off because we're just so unalike. Even though that's probably what kind of a person that Mike needs in his life. With all the yes men around him.
Exactly.
So let's move on here. Earlier this week, the NBA and the NHL announced that they will be postponing their draft lottery and the draft until further notice due to the COVID pandemic. Ken, last week you praised Roger Goodell and the NFL for the way they handled the NFL virtual draft. Why do you think the NBA and NHL decided not to follow their lead?
Well, I feel it's kind of tough because Goodell makes a lot of like money oriented decisions, and he's kind of like, he has a track record for that. And so it's one of those things that you understand when it comes to NFL. The thing with a draft is that you don't really require any face to face. But with combines, you need the athletes to be present. You need them to be in complete, best shape of their lives. You need the scouts to be there. You need all the supporting staff to make sure that all the equipment's ready. And so I think that, in this postponement, especially of like the combine, the draft, I understand, I understand if they still held it, but a combine requires athletes to be in tip top shape. And we're like at that point where it's like, I'm already like almost 2 months out of, since the start of the pandemic. A lot of athletes, they've done their regular home workouts, but I bet you a lot of these like potential draftees that probably just have muscle atrophy because they've been sitting watching too much Netflix.
I also think a reason why they probably postponed it is because their season is so up in the air that they're still halfway through their season and they don't know what they're doing. So I think
absolutely
doing things like that is totally not it's not in the foreground of their mind, that they're like, let's figure out our season first, and then we can figure out what's going to happen, because all of this is going to get pushed back regardless. So I think that's also a big factor too.
It's a huge point. Yeah.
Mike, Ben, any thoughts?
Yeah, the current situation can be frustrating for many sports fans, NBA and NHL. But the NBA's false start on allowing teams to reopen the facilities wasn't really ideal for many. There are complications with leaving open the current season indefinitely, mainly contract that typically expires in June. So there are a lot of things to consider, and we have to understand the business side of all these leagues. But we also have to make sure the safety and the health of all the players and also the fans. And I understand the concern about rushing players into unsafe condition just to draw revenue. I think that's not a good idea to continue the games, even with this kind of situation that we have right now. I think the league, the NBA and NHL really have to think over their decision, making before making it official. There are a lot of things to be considered, and for I think the NHL would want to finish the season and then without the fans to the finish the finals, and then they will try to reconsider of continuing the league. But given the situation, the U.S. now has, I think, the number one in terms of affected COVID infections. So I think that's the number one thing to consider for all these leagues.
You know what's crazy to me, Ben, is that you just announced earlier today that Philippines canceled all sports, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Tomorrow there's UFC. Isn't that crazy here? I feel that's like such an insane change, difference in beliefs in our two countries, where I don't know how to feel about it, because Philippines is doing it, taking it, playing the safe route, making sure that people aren't exposing themselves to one another. Especially with how easily the virus can be contracted. Mm-hmm. But here it's just like, well, let's see these guys fight, fight around in an octagon, like blood, sweat, and tears, right? I mean, so that's what's crazy to me. It's just a huge difference. And we're the as far as the stats, we report it on a daily basis. They're not as a country, it's not really plateauing yet, and we're opening everything up, including sports. And so it's an interesting perspective, interesting times.
That's right. And to go back to NBA and NHL, I don't know how the NHL do their lottery as far as picking who's going to get the first pick, second pick, or whatnot. But I'm interested to see how they're going to do that, because especially with the season up in the air still, I wonder how they're going to strategize who's going to get the first pick and things like that. So that's something I'm looking forward to.
The Warriors are in last place, guaranteed, aren't they?
Well, I mean, I don't know.
No Warriors fans here to be butthurt about that. Jelty, sorry.
I mean, they get those ping pong balls, but it doesn't mean they're going to get the number one pick. So,
well, I think that's a huge reason to not have a draft
on last year. So,
yeah, you can't have the draft if the season's still going on. That makes absolute sense. It's just how are you going to determine what if the Kings or even the Warriors, who are probably all healthy now, make a run, and then they somehow get to 11th seed, still not making the playoffs. I mean, that's not the bottom anymore. And so it's one of those things where it's you can't the NBA still, they had a players meeting today actually. And so it's one of those things where I think they're still up in the air with the situation, and don't know themselves where they're going. I mean, all they know is that we're going to open up some practice facilities where I think it's max of 4 people can be there at a time, right? So I mean,
And also, they announced if they are going to return, I think it's pretty confirmed that they're not going to have fans for the rest of the season. And they were saying that's 40% of their revenue. So it'll be interesting what NBA comes up with to make up for that 40%.
All right, let's have some fun, guys. So on Wednesday, ESPN dropped their top NBA jerseys of all time with the Lakers Showtime Gold jersey finishing at number 1.
woo!
So we thought we would throw the question to our correspondents. What are your top 3 NBA jerseys of all time? So let's
I go ahead.
Begin with me. And you? Okay, go ahead, Ben.
My first was the Vancouver Grizzlies uniform back then. If you guys can remember it, the blue green color with it's really unique design. I have the Mike Bibby jersey there. Then second all-time favorite would be, of course, the Raptors Vince Carter uniform, and it was during these times where Toronto Raptors really became one of the biggest teams back then. And if not for Carter, who really helped the franchise. And of course, Chicago Bulls. The iconic Bulls uniform, Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan, and Dennis Rodman. Those are the 3 favorites of mine. How about you guys?
Zarina's wearing hers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'll go
I had
next,
to.
just to kind of get me out of the way. I'm right there as well, Ben. I like those classic Vancouver Grizzlies jerseys. I may be a little biased because I'm living here, but you still see those jerseys all around the street, and it's just an amazing sight. My number 2 is the Miami Heat.
Oof.
Yes.
Vice City.
The Miami Vice City, but specifically the black ones, the black with the baby blue and the pink trim. Those are fresh. Like I would rock that every day. There it is. There it is on the screen. And my number 1 absolute favorite jersey is the Brooklyn Nets Bed-Stuy Ode to Biggie jersey.
Yeah.
I'm a huge
That's hot.
Notorious B.I.G. fan, Biggie fan. That is my all-time favorite jersey.
Baby.
Nice. I'll go next. So my third was the Golden State
Zarina,
Warriors.
you're up.
Is it Zarina?
Mike, you can go ahead. You can go ahead, Mike.
I think we have a little.
We had an order, but that's okay.
He really wants to show his jerseys, dude.
An order. Go ahead, Zarina. Go ahead.
Okay, so mine's a little bit different, or tried to be different. Of course, any of the Raptors ones I'm all for. My first one, no particular order. I'm a huge fan of green. So I went with the Bucks alternate. I think it was their city edition this year. This season. I love that Fear the Deer jersey. The next one I have is the classic Chicago Bulls black pinstripe. I know everybody loves the red or the all black, but that pinstripe just adds a little bit of something. And then just going back for my love of green, just the classic Seattle Supersonics. I think is like that. Woof, so clean. And the fact that those are so hard to find now is just cherry on top. Those are my top 3.
Beautiful.
Great choice.
All right, Mike, now you're up.
I would say the third one is the Golden State Warriors, the gold jersey, the Bay. It says the Bay on the front.
That's
pretty. Or the city. I'm sorry, the city with the little.
Yeah, well, yeah, both the city and the Bay too.
Pretty sick. And then this, I would say number 2 would have to be the Toronto Raptors old school dinosaur jersey, the purple. And then number 1, I have to go with the Miami Vice, but the teal edition one, the teal, like the main base color.
So
teal.
good.
So
good.
So nice. Gosh.
That's dope.
Love it.
And last but not least, we're going to go with Ken, who has some special pictures.
Special picks. Hey, I love these jerseys so much that I bought them and I wore them. So it's when I see a classic jersey, I just got to get my hands on it. And so like absolutely, just like like the rest of us, like that Raptors jersey with the dinosaur on it is just absolutely fire. And so especially like growing up with VC half man half amazing, it's just like it fills me with nostalgia rocking that jersey. And then, Shaq, I love the dude. Well, that's why the other two jerseys are Shaq jerseys. Even when he was in the Magic, that black pinstripe, is iconic. And so, those days that he went against Jordan, that's I love that Magic jersey. And then, as much as I love the purple and gold jerseys, and I have quite a few of them, that nice blue Los Angeles jersey is just something stunning to look at. I could even wear it on a boat, just like you see in the picture.
I hope you had your boating license, Ken.
I will not disclose that.
No comment. All right. That's all we have for this week's edition of EBC Sports International. On behalf of everyone on our panel, thank you for joining us, and be sure to tune in next week. Make sure to visit our websites at eaglenews.net and eaglenewslive.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/eaglenewsph. Share your thoughts and don't forget to comment. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. I'm Jolty Horvath. We live in interesting times.